Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where as DC continues to struggle on the big screen, they're aggressively moving forward in another area that has always been a position of strength for them, and that's the small screen, both when it comes to animation and live action, although they've even faltered there recently. I think many of us had hoped that their strength in the small screen would eventually influence their decisions on the big screen, but it seems that the situation might actually be working in reverse, as we talk about yet another mixed bag coming down the pipeline from our friends at DC. And I'm talking about the animated Harley Quinn series that was just announced. It's already been picked up as the third official show that's going to debut on the DC streaming service. Yes, everybody wants to be Netflix, Disney, now DC, but as we discussed with my coverage of the Disney streaming service, I'll put a link down below to that video in the video description. It's not so much that they want to have the creative clout that Netflix is enjoying and the media coverage, right? They want that money. Netflix spends a lot of money, but Netflix also makes a lot of money. And so everybody wants that for themselves. And so why shouldn't Warner Brothers, by extension of DC, have a nice little pipeline of cash, right? And they are indeed making it harder and harder not to subscribe to this damn thing. I think I would have subscribed just with the two shows they'd already announced. The live-action Titans show, which I think is being cast quite nicely. It is from Greg Berlanti and Akiva Goldsman, so let's hope for a DC miracle. Again, the talent associated with these things is questionable, and you're going to see that's the case with the Harley Quinn animated series as well. The only thing that I think is probably a slam dunk is Young Justice, because it's the exact same creative team as the first two seasons, and they did a darn good job. So that show will be returning on the streaming service as well. Now, as for this animated Harley Quinn movie, it went right to series. They were like, that's a great idea, let's do it. And I agree. It's an absolutely fabulous idea. One that you would think could not miss. But it turns out that I think that has a good chance of missing, and let me explain why. Now, based on the promo pic that they released, I can recognize several characters from the comic book that's currently out there by Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Conner. And I have to tell you, as someone who reads that comic and read it since it was released, but I only recently gave it up. They keep occasionally bringing me back in with like a good storyline or a guest star, a character guest star. But it took me a long time to give up on this comic because I love the character so much. And I've liked the artwork. But I think that the comic book itself is just so incredibly weak. From the get-go, it was never good, that I worry about the animated series that, if it's based on that. Basically, Harley Quinn, they are saying, in the description for the series, they say Harley Quinn leaves the Joker and decides to become her own queen pin of crime, with numerous guest stars, and they have Poison Ivy really, front and center there in that picture, but there's like a whole lot of other characters as well. And, she's the Harley Quinn that they're presenting is a mix of the one that you see in the movies. We'll talk about Margot Robbie in just a moment, but also the one that you've seen in the new comic, the roller derby queen. That's something that Palmiotti and Amanda Conner introduced for the character. But she also, lives on Coney Island. She is the landlord of a building that has, for lack of a better word, a freak show, that performs downstairs. So everybody who's in the show lives in her building and she interacts with them. And, she goes around doing a lot of, they basically, as everyone said when the comic came out, turned her into Deadpool. And they've even given her a Deadpool rip-off love interest called the Red Tool. I'm actually rooting for them as a couple when I do read the comic. But anyway, it's all over the place. It's not particularly funny, and it's not particularly Harley Quinn. I think that Harley Quinn, even if she splits from the Joker, she still has his branding. You can't really, I don't think you can just rebrand her as some crazy mook, on Coney Island. So that's the first problem with this series. The second is that it's from the creative team behind the canceled, first delayed, and then canceled live-action sitcom Powerless. One of the few times that DC didn't work on the small screen. Who would say to those people, what else you got? I will say that oh, by the way, I want to say also, I had put it at the end of my notes, but it's better to put it here. There's not a single woman announced on the creative team. And I think that is a huge mistake, particularly after the strength of Wonder Woman and particularly after the weakness of the Wonder Woman depiction in Justice League. So I don't think this should be an all-female creative team by any means behind the scenes, but I think that you should have one woman in there. You know, there are a lot of great female comedians working these days. I'd hire one of them, right? But anyway, I do think that the animation looks nice. It actually reminds me of Don Bluth a little bit. So I think that's a good choice. And they're saying it's going to be an Adult Swim type show, right? Adult animation. And I think that's a great idea. Again, total mixed bag. And then finally, they want the cherry on the sundae to be that Margot Robbie will voice her own character. That's a big ask. Even in the coverage, they were like, I don't know if she's going to do that. She's very in demand, she's very busy, and I think most important of all, she's trying to win an award. And it's hard to win an award when you do a voice in an animated series, especially when, you know, if you work backwards and you become a really celebrated actor and then you go do a voice in an animated series, it's a bit easier because you already have that cachet. But when you're trying to get that cachet, I don't think this would particularly be helpful to her, especially because I have my serious doubts about the quality of it. I mean, let's see what kind of scripts they hand over to Margot Robbie to ask her to do it. If they're really smart, they won't send her any scripts and just say, do you want to do it, or do you want some other actress to maybe lay claim to the character, scare her into doing it. I think that she'll probably, if I were her, it's not going to take that long because the Golden Globe nominations are coming out December 13th. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. Oh no, December 11th, sorry. December 11th, Monday, December 11th. So soon. But I think that Margot Robbie's going to wait to see if she gets any nominations for I, Tonya. And if she does, then she'd be like, I ain't voicing any animated series. But if she doesn't get any nominations, she's like, what else do I have but Harley Quinn? I'm in. So that's what, I mean, and again, that's like just two weeks away, basically, 2 or 3 weeks away. She can wait. And they can wait for an answer. So I'm curious, do you think you're going to subscribe to the streaming service? What do you think of this show? Do you agree that it's a mixed bag? Or do you think it just can't miss no matter, it's infallible? I told you, I've stopped buying the Harley Quinn comic, although I do think I'm going to buy it this week. There's a big Poison Ivy storyline that I want to read. But I've stopped buying it consistently, and it would be horrible if people stopped watching this show consistently. All right, so I guess if you get it for free, though, because you're paying for the streaming service overall, all right, that's how they always get you. All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day, speaking of awards season, the Golden Globes, as I said, their nominations are going to be announced December 11th. The show itself is on January 7th, and they finally found a host. Very late in the game. This is interesting. Well, as you can see, it's Seth Meyers. We'll talk about him in just a moment. But it seems that nobody wants to host these awards shows, which I find hilarious. Now, the word in the trades is that nobody wants to host because it's a thankless gig. You don't get a lot of promotional mileage out of it, right? No, that's why nobody wants to do it. You know, it takes a lot of time and effort for very little return. I think that the networks have just really downgraded this gig by putting their own late night hosts in there. You know, Seth Meyers, of course, on NBC hosts the Late Show after Fallon's Tonight Show, and Fallon hosted the Golden Globes last year. Kimmel is returning to the Oscars, and he's, of course, ABC's late night host. And it just makes it not as illustrious and prestigious a gig. I mean, when it was more about making just an entertaining show, and Billy Crystal did these iconic hosting jobs, then everybody wanted the gig back then. So I think that it's not so much you know, the gig itself, but how the gig is being handled by the networks. And I think that all these awards shows, although the Oscars with their diminishing ratings doesn't have any bargaining power, and this is how ABC was able to force Kimmel on them in the first place, but, you know, letting the networks have their way is not doing anybody any favors. So hopefully this trend will end soon. But I'm actually sort of excited about Seth Meyers. He's a mixed bag too. Let me tell you why. I think that his Emmys monologue is one of the best monologues I've ever heard when he hosted the Emmys. It was brilliant. It was hilarious. It was really insidery, but I think still accessible. It was just, I just thought it was absolutely fabulous. One of the best, if not the best, straight monologues. I'm not talking about like Billy Crystal's fabulous sketches that he used to do when he would run through the movies with the Oscars, but just a straight monologue. He did just an absolutely fabulous job. So I'm very excited. When I first heard the news, I was like, this is going to be great. That's going to be a great show. And I think he actually helps he's helped written the jokes for when Tina Fey and Amy Poehler have hosted. So I think, you know, there's a lot of potential here. But I will add, and this is what made me a little nervous, is that lately Seth Meyers has been carving out a niche for himself with hardcore political humor. He's extremely anti-Trump. I mean, no one's carved out a bigger niche in this area than Stephen Colbert. It's worked out very nicely for him. I believe he's hosting, right? He's hosting. I think he was hosting some sort of, I forget the awards show. Also because he's a late night host. Craziness. But anyway, I think that that's the last thing that Hollywood needs right now. And it's the last thing the Golden Globes needs right now. I think it would be great to have a totally non-political, just make fun of the movies kind of situation. Because Hollywood has their own problems, of course, with all the sexual harassment scandals that break daily. You know, sometimes two people go down in a day. It's still going strong, and I just don't think I think it's definitely too soon. And actually, not that funny of a situation. And that's another thing. Some people are saying people don't want this gig because of all the political humor. But you know what? I think a really good comedian can find the jokes that are appropriate for the time and for the event. So I'm curious, what do you think of Seth Meyers hosting? Do you think that it would be bad if he went anti-Trump in his jokes? And why do you think it's such a thankless gig these days? And how do you feel about the networks shoehorning their late night hosts into these, what used to be prestigious hosting gigs? All right, so the third story of the day is that Lizzy Caplan has gotten a job. She also has, she started out in movies, but she really got like a steady paycheck from the small screen with Masters of Sex. And also she was in The Interview, which never got released, unfortunately. She was like, that was going to be my big break. But she's got another shot here. You know, it's like we discussed just the other day, Hollywood is a marathon business, not a sprint. So she stayed in it, and now she has a really great gig that she just landed in. That's the new Gambit movie. Channing Tatum is still set to star with Gore Verbinski finally directing, right? I think he'll stay. His career is not doing well. He needs this. And they want the movie. They're tentatively hoping to release it, because who knows what could happen with this project at this point. But it's set for February 14th, Valentine's Day 2019. Great release date for Gambit. He's always been quite the ladies' man and charmer, and I think it would be a good fit. Now, no word on the role that she's going to play. My guess would be Belladonna. She's like, it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet situation they set up in the comics for Gambit. He is like the Prince Charming of the Thieves Guild in New Orleans, and she's the princess of the Assassins Guild in New Orleans. And they're supposed to marry to bring their houses together, but let's just say it's not. Romeo and Juliet's not a happy story, and this is even a worse story. All right, so she could also maybe be the new Rogue. I could totally see that with her. We'll see how it shakes out. But either way, while she's a very likable comedian, you can also kind of get a feel for what they're willing to spend on this movie, right? Lizzy Caplan is a very affordable actress. So it seems like maybe I think I'd like to assume the best, and that they want to save all of their money for special effects. That would be wonderful, right? But we'll see. I think that Lizzy Caplan gives the whole project a little bit of a Deadpool feel, and I think, of course, they had just announced James Franco in Multiple Man, and I think that going the Deadpool Logan route is a good idea, but they should have a little bit more variation. So I hope that Lizzy Caplan works out. I'm very excited for her, but I don't know how I feel about it for the picture from a fan Marvel perspective. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Now, speaking of Marvel, I have a viewer question from last week. It's from Noah ZTV, and Noah says, Grace, viewer question. Disney just announced that the first Incredibles 2 trailer is coming out tomorrow. It came out on Saturday, and I'm super excited, by the way. Many people, though, thought that the Infinity War trailer would come out right after Justice League to take away the spotlight and headlines. Instead, Disney's releasing this trailer. Do you think this is intentional? Also, do you think this will affect Justice League? Is Avengers 2 similar to Justice League, so they chose Incredibles instead? Could this be Kevin Feige's master plan? So many questions. Anyway, your videos are the best. Thank you so much for all your insight on the industry, and I look forward to watching the Incredibles trailer with you. Oh, I hope that you did. I had a fun time on Saturday. It was a little bit of a letdown. It was the ultimate tease. But let's discuss this. Basically, Noah wants to know the thinking behind when trailers are released. So let's talk about this. This is a great example. So studios always release the trailer for their next film with their current one. So a lot of this is simply that Pixar wants to get you excited for what they have coming next after Coco, and that just happens to be The Incredibles 2. So that's why they put a teaser in front of that movie. No matter what the next Pixar movie was going to, what would have been, it would have aired a teaser in front of Coco. I felt the teaser backfired a little bit because it's not really anything. It's just, as I said, this better not be the logo, and it ended up being a baby, Jack, the baby in the logo. But, you know, it did get 113 million views in 24 hours, putting it number 7 for the most watched trailers in the first 24 hours. Not bad. I think if it had been a full trailer, it would have been a lot higher. And so we'll see what happens when they actually release an actual look at the film. But anyway, when a studio releases a picture, expect a lot of trailers for their own movie to play in front of it, and also similar movies. For instance, Coco's coming out, so Disney also has A Wrinkle in Time. They released that trailer because they want that in front of their own movie because it's Disney Pixar. Hotel Transylvania 3, the cruise ship entry in that franchise, also released a trailer to play in front of Coco because they're like, oh, do you like animated movies? Here's another animated movie that you should get excited about. That's, they basically kind of know what audience is going to show up, so they want to target that audience. They're a captive audience, although with reserved seating, less and less. People just come at the last minute and intentionally miss the trailers. But that's what they get for playing 20 to 30 minutes of them. So anyway, Infinity War just wasn't a match for Coco. There's no reason to put it in front of Coco. And also, it's a bit too much of a ding for the Justice League. It's a little bit too much of a mustache-twirling move. And they certainly were able to, I think, get it with Punisher anyway, by releasing that on the small screen over on Marvel. Now, so Infinity War, you want to have it released with something that's going to get the most mileage for Disney. So Star Wars, that's certainly a big picture, but Star Wars doesn't need a boost, and Star Wars will be generating a lot of its own headlines. You might even see a Han Solo tease maybe to get people excited about that, and maybe not talking about Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who broke their silence on that, by the way. They were very, very respectful, although one of their collaborators said, I hope that movie poops the bed. So you can kind of see what the underlying attitude is from that, from those two and the people who support them. So hilarious. All right, so it could happen. I think that Ron Howard is also, for instance, lately a mixed bag. But Star Wars will generate a lot of its own headlines, and so you don't need to kind of, I'd say, waste Infinity War there. Where I think Infinity War will do the most good is in front of Black Panther in February, very soon, and that movie, that'll help that movie out. That movie, I think, is still a gamble. Now, some of you might be like, what? I'm offended that you would think that Black Panther isn't a slam dunk at the box office. Well, let's take a look at its trailer. So Black Panther's initial teaser, it's number 12 on the most watched trailers in 24 hours with 89 million views. But if you look at just its YouTube views, because that's like everywhere that it played, Facebook, everywhere, the Twitters, websites, etc. So the Black Panther teaser on YouTube, the official upload on the Marvel YouTube channel, has 33 million views. Fantastic. But the follow-up full trailer only has 10 million views. That's a significant loss of interest. That's literally a third. That's not good. Now, in comparison, Thor Ragnarok, its teaser trailer, which was, again, one of the most watched trailers ever in the first 24 hours, everywhere. But on YouTube, it did 46 million views, the teaser trailer, the official upload. But then the full trailer came out a couple of months after. That actually went up with 55 million views. And so that's the direction you want to go in. So Thor Ragnarok saw an increase of almost 10 million views, whereas Black Panther decreased by a third. So I think they should definitely try and definitely put Infinity War in front of Black Panther, just to get everybody talking, maybe be like, where's that Soul Stone? It's in this movie, you better see it. Just to get, I think just to make Black Panther seem like more of an event and just to remind everybody how much they love Marvel, right? That's where I expect you to see Infinity War. All right, so anyway, that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below, I think, today's top 3 stories. Noah's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow. There will be a morning movie news tomorrow, and then it will be off for the rest of the week because of Thanksgiving. But write down below what you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions, of course, that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.